Welcome to another episode of the ACC Insider Podcast here on the Field of 68. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by an ACC legend himself, Wake Forest's own Randolph Childress, coming off of a thrilling Virginia Tech NC State game last night. There's nothing better than a little Virginia Tech NC State hoops on a Wednesday. Randolph, we got a lot to get to in this conference. But before we dive in, at the start of the season, we all kind of expected pretty big things out of this league, right? We were all there at ACC Media Day. We all sat down for 2 days to kind of preview this conference. And I would make the argument that the teams we all expected to be at the top of the league are at the top of the league. And the teams that we all expected to be really good are different levels of really good. It's just maybe due to some losses in non-conference, they're not quite as nationally respected as maybe we thought they would be. But I think if you look at it, Duke, Clemson, Louisville, North Carolina, Wake Forest, SMU, Pitt, those are the top 7 teams in the conference, and I think we all had something similar to that heading into the season.
I think you're right. Maybe in different orders, but they were preseason the teams I think that everyone was expecting to be at the top of the league, and they are right now. I think one of the narratives, or one of the things that people didn't consider with the ACC is the injuries that a lot of these teams face early, and throughout the league, they're starting to get some of their players back. I think Notre Dame, getting Marcus Burton back.
Mhm.
Georgia Tech has been crushed with injuries. I think they're a team looking to take a step too, see if they can get maybe in the middle of the pack. We didn't expect Florida State, who got a big win last night against Pitt at home. They're kind of starting to creep in there, man. So it's a ton of basketball left, but the top teams that we were expecting to be there are there.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about Pitt. I'm going to ask you about Florida State, and we're going to get into Notre Dame here in a little bit. But we got to start with the headline of the ACC, and that is the Duke Blue Devils, the best team in the conference, maybe the best team in college basketball. And I think the one group that I would kind of circle to say has a very real chance to win a national title coming out of this conference. They are elite defensively. We're going to see what kind of happens without Malik Brown. It sounds like his sprained knee is going to be something that's a little bit more than like a game to game, day to day kind of a deal. But they're 15-2. The 2 games that they lost, they had chances to win down the stretch. And if you look at what KenPom is projecting, they're supposed to go 19-1 in that conference. So, what do you make of the Duke Blue Devils? What do you make of Cooper Flagg? It feels like he really is here living up to the expectations we had on him.
Yeah, he's the real deal, and this team is really, really good. They did a great job of just making the pieces fit. And
Mhm.
I think Shire probably wouldn't admit this, and maybe he would, but I think he loves having a rim protecting big and size. Last year they played with the 3 smaller guards. I think he loves the size that he has. He loves the rim protection that Malawatch brings. Obviously, Cooper Flagg, whether it's Cooper next year, it'll be Boozer. It's always to be that kid. They just seem to be doing a really good job of finding players to complement their stars. But this team is elite defensively. There's not many teams that have the ability to put 5 guys on the floor, 6'5" or bigger, and we can switch everything you're doing and provide rim protection. So they have depth. I think their defense it can just take them as far as they need to go. Um, let's see if they take a step though, Rob. I think the only thing that concerns you about Duke would be will they get tested in the league? And I think the great thing about their schedule though is they do play Illinois next month, and we'll get a chance to see that game to see how they respond to that. But I think this team is loaded. I think they're as good as any team in college basketball, and they rely on the defensive end of the floor. I think they'll be fine. They still, the only question mark again I'd say is that late game ball in the hands. Is it Cooper or is it going to be someone else? Obviously, Cooper stepped up and proven that he can do that, be that guy. He struggled with some of that early, but there hasn't been much struggle late. And I don't know when they're going to be in another close game in the ACC. That's the only concern that I would have for them going into the tournament.
I feel very comfortable saying that both games against North Carolina are going to be close. That rival, it doesn't matter. You could have Duke undefeated and you could have North Carolina winless or vice versa. Those 2 games are going to end up being close no matter what happens. That's just the way that rivalry goes. We'll talk about North Carolina in a sec, but I want to ask you one more thing about Duke. How Put this into context for me, because I think a lot of times when you see teams that are as freshman laden and rely on freshmen as much as Duke does this season, you don't generally see them be at the level defensively that this Duke team is, right? Or you don't see them be able to execute offense as crisply as this Duke team does. And to see this group, they're top 3 in both offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency on KenPom. And they are a team that has, I mean, look, Cooper Flagg and Con Knipple and Kama Malawach are probably 3 of what their top 5 guys.
Yeah.
It's really impressive they've been able to do that with freshmen that are this. Cooper's not even a freshman, man. He's a high school senior out here playing as a freshman. It's crazy that John's been able to do that with this group. I don't think it's getting anywhere near enough attention.
I wouldn't put Knipple in the as a defensive category as the other two, but he competes. So and which is
Mhm.
enough. He's a willing defender and he's to compete. Cooper Flagg is different. I mean, he provides rim protection, his versatility to guard anybody on the floor. And the most underrated part of it is Malawach. Come on,
Mhm.
Malawach. He's switching on guards when he needs to, point guards, keeping them in front, as well as providing rim protection. So those two guys, I think, are a big time defenders. They're elite. And again, the rest of their roster, man, when they get Malik Brown back, like I said, they got 6 or 7 guys they can just throw out there that's making it tough when you're competing. They're unselfish. But having freshmen, like you said, they're just not often you get freshmen that come in defensively, buying in and this good. And that's what makes this team so special.
Yeah, and shout out to Tyrese Proctor too, who went from being a guy that everyone predicted could be a potential lottery pick heading into last season to now accepting a role as like a 3-and-D floor spacer and all the way buying in. It's not easy to do that for a kid, and I think he deserves an immense amount of credit for. All right, next question I have for you. We got Clemson, we got Louisville, we got North Carolina, and we got your Wake Forest Demon Deacons, who have kind of bounced back here. They're all sitting with one loss in the league. I want
Right.
you to kind of parse through this for me. If you got to pick one of them as the second best team in this conference and the biggest threat to Duke to maybe, I don't know if win the ACC regular season title is something that's necessarily realistic, but make a run at an ACC tournament title, who are you riding with?
I got to go with Louisville. I think Louisville is the second best team in this league, and I think there's starting to be some separation. To be honest, if I had to say, I think it's Duke, I think it's Louisville, and then I would put Clemson, Wake, Carolina, SMU in that next group. And Pitt, all in the next group of kids. I think from what I've seen, um, the other teams are right there, but I think Louisville has taken a step, and I think that they're the second best team.
Why?
Considering the
Why?
injuries.
What's that
Well,
step in?
one is because I think they just everything about what they've done. They've beaten, they've had these games against Pitt and they've won these games. And so they got to travel on the road. Louisville's going to have to get on the road and win some games on the road before they cement themselves. But I think right now, if you're asking me today, they look like it because I love their identity of what they are. I think everybody has bought in. They're a connected group of guys. And not many teams could quote unquote lose their best players and do this. Like if Kason Pryor was on this team, this is to me, a top 15 team in the country.
Mhm.
And there's no excuses. It's next man up. Those guys are just buying in. Hadley's playing well with them. Edwards is playing well. They're kind of attacking the basket with those guys. Chucky Hepburn is as good of a two-way guard as you'll find in college basketball. They're just playing well, man. And watch what Pat's doing and seeing him up close. I think he's playing great coaching wise, situational basketball with this group. They're relentless on the glass. This team is just there doesn't have a lot of depth. That's the only question mark that I have on the front line is production. If Waterman has a thumb issue, if he can figure that out, maybe get healthy, start knocking down some shots, I think it elevates him a little bit. Scott's been really good for him, but if they can remain healthy, I think Louisville has a chance to be a team to knock them off. And I'll say this: I was saying this last night, calling the game last night. This could be another year where it could be a bitch stealer because if Duke leaves, if I'm any one of these teams, I think can get hot and not typically you can always say that somebody can get hot and run, but I
Mhm.
think this year more than ever because of the injuries people had sustained early in the year, you don't really know what they have with JJ Star. I mean, just a ton of teams in this league has star players out. If I'm some of these teams that dug themselves in a hole early, I'm trying to get healthy, get my group together and get ready to try to make a run. Because I think this year, if Duke stumbles in the ACC tournament, I think it's wide open for anybody.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of teams that can kind of be play a little bit role of the spoiler there, and we'll talk about them here in a second. There's one particularly on the West Coast that I think is really interesting in that sense. I will just add about Louisville. Um, we talked about it a little bit on After Dark. I don't know how much we've talked about on this show. It's really impressive how they were kind of able to reinvent themselves a little bit, right? Like obviously the injury to Corin Johnson has been something where, that he was banged up in the preseason and they decided to shut it down and get him an extra year eligibility and not burn that one season. And it is what it is. I think that they kind of knew what they were without, or knew that they were going to have a chance that they would be without him coming into the season. The case and prior one, getting hurt against Oklahoma and then coming back out of Oklahoma, you got Mississippi at home, Mississippi, we seen like what Ole Miss can do. They just went to Alabama and won. And then you got Duke at home, and Duke is Duke, and you actually kind of hung with them a little bit.
Yeah.
Struggled against UTEP, and then you got to go to Rupp Arena, and you actually put up a pretty good fight in Rupp Arena while you're trying to reestablish what your identity is without a guy in Case and Pryor who was either your best or your second best player, depending on how you want to make that argument. And to be able to come through all of that and now find your groove, getting Kadir Traore back helps. I put immense amount of credit on that coaching staff and the players being able to kind of move past the loss of a player that is as high usage as Case and Pryor was. That's impressive.
That is. I mean, you're exactly right. And watch what they're doing, man. They're all dialed in. They're all bought in. They just got an identity about them, man. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they compete, they defend. When you watch them play offensively, they lead the league in 3-point attempts, and they're all buying in. And it's just like Rain Smith is their best shooter. It's not even close. But you should see guys turning down shots in a game, knowing that all right, we want to get him shots in transition. I'm watching guys drive, turn it down. I had an official in the airport the next day after the Pitt game, the official come up to me and say, "Hey, man," he said, watching those guys play, he goes, "I'm seeing guys on the floor really turning down shots, really trying to find that guy in transition." He said, "I'm looking, thinking the guy's going to attack one-on-one, and he's holding out, waiting on Rain Smith to come." This is an official just talking about the communication that he was hearing on the floor with
Mm-hmm.
Louisville. And it's just little stuff like that about him, man, that has this group really dialed in. They're cheering for one another. This for what they've gone through, first year, first time coach. I mean, they crushed it. I mean, I mean, we've given them A+ across the board, man, and they're no excuses. Next man up. They're figuring it out, and I do. I just think that whatever they have left is enough. They just have enough to keep themselves, I think, as a second place team in this league as of now. They just need to remain healthy. They don't need any more injuries.
Yeah, I don't know if they have the ceiling to be able to, maybe make a Final Four, but second weekend is absolutely something that this team is going to be able to have in the mix here. I want to make the argument for North Carolina here. Okay,
Mhm.
um, let's talk about the 6 losses that they have. They lose by 3 at Allen Fieldhouse. Kansas is not Kansas, but that's still Allen Fieldhouse, and that's still a
Yep.
top 10, 15 team in the country, right? You lose by 13 to Auburn in Maui. It's Auburn, man.
Yep.
Being able to stay close to them and connected is actually kind of impressive when
Right.
they're healthy. You lose to Michigan State in overtime, which didn't look great at the time, but Michigan State might be the best team in the Big Ten this year, top 15 in all the metrics. You lose at home to Alabama. Kind of got beat up a little bit, but Alabama's Alabama. They might do that to you. You lose to Florida in Charlotte in a game where if you get 2 defensive rebounds or 1 defensive rebound towards the end, you probably win that game. We've seen what Florida's been able to do. And then you lose at Louisville, whose metrics aren't great because of what happened at the start of the year, but who we both agree is probably the second best team in this conference, probably a top 20, 25 kind of team in America, and that was in the Yum Center. And beyond that, you don't have a bad loss. You beat Dayton when
No.
Dayton was good. You beat UCLA when UCLA was good. The only concern that I have with North Carolina is that it's hard to build your resume on. We have a bunch of good losses and we beat Dayton and UCLA. Dayton's fallen off the rails here. UCLA's fallen off the rails here. Like they're 2 wins where you could say that's the best part of our resume. Don't look anywhere near as good as they did 2 weeks ago. So that's my only concern with North Carolina. I'd make the argument that with the way that Ian Jackson is playing, they could play and hang with and beat anybody in college basketball, save for maybe like 5 teams.
One, I don't. I can't. He can't go back to the bench, right? He has to
Mhm.
start, and whatever. However, if Seth Trimble stays there, if he puts him back in the starting lineup, then Hubert's got rich man problems. He's got to figure that out. But Ian Jackson going back to the bench and out of the starting lineup can't be one of them. He's going to have to be there, and those other
Mhm.
guards just have to figure that out. But that's going to be interesting though to me is how Hubert handles that. To be honest, and I've said this before, Mike. The reason I say that is RJ Davis is a senior, right? Seth Trimble, and you want him back, right? You want him coming back for his senior year. And credit to him,
Mhm.
I said this to him to his face. I thought Seth Trimble coming back was just a testament to him because I thought a kid like him usually going to Porter, they're gone, and he is by far, I think, their best two-way guard that allows them to play small ball because he's such a big-time defender. He guards bigger guys for him and is unguardable in transition. Ellie Cadeau is really good with the ball in his hands, and he's making plays. So, what Hubert Davis does with that lineup would be interesting to see if those guys can stay connected and figure things out. They're good. If they just defend, they cannot. The only issue you have with them is going to be of all those teams we talked about in the ACC, that group, that Wake Forest, that UNC, the Pitt, and all, can you avoid the losses at the bottom of the league?
Hmm.
That's the thing about them that's going to elevate who gets in, who doesn't is, and it's going to happen. It's just league play, right? It's just there's a level of comfort, there's a league play, and there's just not a lot of wins you're going to get outside of Duke and Carolina, and they're fighting for each other outside of Duke in Louisville maybe to figure that out and where they're going to finish in the league and tournament wise. But they got to avoid the bottom of the league losses, and they're going to come. And I think it's going to be detrimental to the teams that do get those losses because you just don't have enough quality wins to balance it out.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't lost to a bad team this year,
No,
right?
no, not yet.
They haven't beaten you can make an argument they haven't beaten a good team yet, but they haven't lost to a bad team.
That's
So
like,
far
and
this year.
another team that's like Wake.
Hmm. Well,
Michigan. They got Michigan loss, but Wake is beating the team that they're supposed to beat. They don't have a bad loss, but Wake is about to get to a stretch here where we're going to figure out they're going to play themselves into the tournament or they're going to leave themselves out of it over the next month or so. That just their
well,
schedule coming dictate that.
let's talk about that schedule coming up because they go to Virginia Tech on Saturday, which
Yep.
that's a sneaky trap game, man. I'm telling you, you go to Blacksburg. I don't know what the environment's going to be like there, but it's going to be a Saturday, and
Students are coming back, so students are back. Students that are not back yet, they weren't back yesterday. Students will be back. That'll be a tough game just because it's a road game, but I think Wake can get that one in. After this, it gets interesting.
North Carolina at home, Duke at home, at Louisville, Pitt at home. You got three out of those four games at home, and that's like the quality wins that you have available on your schedule. You get to go to Duke on March 3rd. But beyond that, I mean, every other game, here it is. Stanford, Cal, Florida State, SMU, NC State, Virginia, Notre Dame, and Georgia Tech. They got to win, I'd say, two of the next four, maybe even three of the next four if you really want to feel comfortable. But that Michigan win is aged like fine wine, man. That's going to end up looking like a really, really good win on Selection Sunday. So good for them. What has changed with Wake? Like, how have they been able to kind of turn this thing forward?
You know what? I don't think anything has changed yet. I think we're going to find out about them. They're really good defensively. I think it's different than what we're accustomed to them looking in the past, where they've been really good offensively and maybe not as
Mhm.
strong defensively. This group is really, really strong defensively. They're getting back Omaha Blue. Let's see how he transitions in. But we're going to find out. I would say that they've beaten the teams that they're supposed to beat. Right now, it's going to get interesting with the next group of guys. Like, the Carolina, Duke, and Louisville, Pitt, those four games will be big. And it's not just that. You talk about those. I'm worried about, and I said this at the beginning of the season, you got those four games, and then, Rob, you're going into the California trip.
Mhm.
And we talked about that because one night we were doing after dark and Virginia was at halftime and we logged off at 12:15 in the morning and Virginia was at halftime. So they're going to go out, they're going to play Cal, they're going to play Stanford. They come back home and they play Florida State at home and then they go to Dallas and then go to Raleigh and play NC State. Like
Yep.
they're the only team in the league that had to play all three of those teams and they're going to play them in a four-game stretch. So after the top essentially four teams in the league they play, then they go on an absolute brutal stretch of travel and games that are not going to be necessarily easy as well. And then they return back to Raleigh. So they got that stretch right there. I think will dictate where the Deeks are. If they can come out of that 5-3 or something like that, then I think they kind of themselves in a good position to get in. But we're gonna learn a lot about them over the next month.
Yeah, that is not an easy stretch, man. You play all your tough games at home, and you got to have the worst travel stretch that you're going to find
Right.
in the ACC. We mentioned Clemson earlier. We got to get to them because Terrence Oglesby would find both of us, track us down, and try to palm. By the way, did you see the other day? He was doing it was Georgia Tech was playing on Monday. I can't remember. They were playing Clemson. Clemson
Clemson.
was playing at Georgia Tech,
Mhm.
and they brought your boy Duncan Powell over, and he walked over. It was at like a post game interview. Walked over, palms To's bald head, right? Grabs his head. They put it on national television, and then afterwards they cut to To, and he's just sitting there with like, "You just did that to me. You put me on national TV, with my bald head getting palmed."
I
Duncan
need
Powell.
that. I need a screenshot of that. I need video of that. I need that.
So shout out to Terrence Oglesby for being a good sport there. You got a loss at Boise State. You got a couple of overtime losses to Memphis and South Carolina, which probably aren't as bad as they seem, and you lost at Louisville. Beyond that, they're 14-4, man. I think they got to start stacking some good wins here. That Kentucky win at home is gonna end up looking really, really good. But you got Pitt away on Saturday. What do you make of this Clemson team? They really got it. Just feels like the same Clemson team every single year that we see with Bradford now.
I don't worry about them. I think they'll be fine. Just like we talked about Wake having a schedule that's kind of like, God, you worry about it. I thought Clemson had the schedule lottery. They're going to get Duke and Carolina at home, and they don't travel as much. They got a lot of their big tests at home. So the Kentucky win is going to age well. If they can get one of those two games, obviously, I think the Clemson game for Duke is probably going to be the toughest game that they have outside of North Carolina, which is always a rivalry game. That game will be big. They've shown they can step up and beat big teams by beating Kentucky. So Clemson will punch their ticket. They're just too good. They're too well coached. They're good defensively. I really don't worry about them. They'll figure it out. They'll finish in the top four. They'll take care of business. They're one team I've just seen enough of
Mm-hmm.
that I don't worry about them going forward. I think they'll be fine. As long as, again, like everyone else, as long as they stay healthy, they'll be fine.
Yeah. So the two teams that I have questions on, and I want you to take on both of them. SMU, they got a game winner from Boopie Miller last night to beat Virginia in Virginia, which was a loss that they probably could not afford. And
Yep.
Pitt, who has maybe, I think you can make the argument they have like a top three backcourt in this conference and maybe a top 10 backcourt in America. But they're now sitting here at 3-3 in the ACC. They lost at home to Louisville. They lost at Florida State. A little bit of a kerfuffle at the end of that game. I understand why Jeff Capel was mad. You know, you're making those when you're giving up a layup and the other team's giving up going and taking the points is not necessarily the most sportsman kind of maneuver to do. But what do you make of this Pitt team? What do you make of this SMU team? And do you think either of them have a chance to be able to kind of string together enough wins to get a bid to the an at-large bid to the tournament?
Well, Pitt's the one if you got to be concerned. There's three in a row with them. Losing to Duke, you were okay with. They lost to Louisville at home last
Mm-hmm.
Saturday. That was a big loss. That was a big game. It went down to the wire. No shame in that. Then you come out and you got to figure out a way to beat Florida State. And I think some of the frustration from Capel, yeah, that situation happened. I think it's frustration with his team because they're in the tournament, but then you drop three straight. Now you're sweating bullets again. You're starting to be concerned about it because that's what we're talking about. You're either going to play yourself in or out, and they were in. They were on the right side of the bubble, and you drop three in a row. Now you're playing Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, dare I say it's a must-win game for Pitt. Like you need to win that game. That just kind of starts to right the ship. They need to figure out a way to get it. That backcourt you talked about had 12 turnovers last night.
Not
They
good.
have to be better. They have to be better. Like there's no other way to describe it. And I think the problem with them is sometimes they take too much of the responsibility and try to do too much. Their number one job has got to be take care of the basketball. They're going to score the balls in their hands. They get in the paint. They're good players. They're really good players, but they're not going to win many games with 12 turnovers combined. And they got to do a better job of doing that. They got to figure out a way, come hell or high water, to get it done in Little John. They got to figure out a way to win at Clemson. You just can't drop four games in a row. If they do that, then I think they may be out looking in and then have to scrap their way back in things.
That's
So
the kind of
I'm
thing that
not
can
counting them out.
spiral a season too, man. You lose four in
Yeah,
a
yeah.
row in this era. That's the kind of thing that can turn this thing bad. So
Rob, that's why I think that's what I think all the frustration, yesterday's incident was about. Yeah, man, I get the layup and everything. This is a team that was playing really well, and they're searching for answers right now. The three straight losses, obviously some good teams in Florida State's playing better, but it's conference play. You're going to lose some type of games like that on the
mhm.
road. But they dropped one at home. They got some answers to figure out. They got some answers. They're searching for answers right now. They got to figure some things out.
Yeah, how about SMU? SMU is an interesting one because I think that they have enough talent to be a real threat
Yeah.
to programs, like a Pitt and programs like a Clemson and a Louisville that they can kind of knock them off and get some wins. But that loss to Butler is not going to age all that well. The
No.
best one that they have beyond that is what, like LSU, maybe Washington State, and they got to go to Miami, and then you get Louisville at home on Tuesday, January 21st. I think that is a really important game for them to kind of
Right.
get themselves to the point where they are actually in this conversation. Because I don't know how much they don't get Duke again. I don't think they get North Carolina
They
again.
don't.
So you got Louisville on Tuesday, you got Pitt on February 11th, and you got Clemson on the 22nd. All three of those games are at home. I think you got to win at least two of them. You probably want to win three of them if you're SMU and you really want to put yourself in that tournament conversation.
The concern that this is another team that goes back to what we're talking about. They're in that store. They're just going to play. Who steps up? And I don't think there's going to be six teams in from the ACC, right? I don't think it's going to be six. I think I'm pretty sure about four. I think it's going to be five, and I think Louisville and Duke will be two for sure. And then I think it's SMU, Pitt, Wake Forest, and I think Clemson may be the third team, right? I feel pretty comfortable about them, but they have to play themselves in. And there's just a few. SMU is just one of those teams, man. And they're right there having to figure it out. Can they, everything's in front of them. No bad losses, no great wins. And you got the league to play. And you're talking about 20 games, man. And can they go 15-5? Like, is that realistic? Is that something that they could do? Like, I don't know. And that's hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so are they good enough to do that? They stole one last night at Virginia. Hell of a shot by Boopy Miller, but they're playing well right now, and it's open. It's just so this league is so wide open outside of Duke that
Well,
it just
and here's the thing, like, all right, let's play that game, right? Let's say
yep.
you lose to Louisville at
Mm-hmm.
home, you lose to Pitt at home, you lose to Clemson at home, right? The rest of your wins: Miami, NC State, Cal, Stanford, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, Notre Dame, Cal, Stanford again, Syracuse, Florida State. You put that along with a resume that has Washington State and LSU. You're 15-5 in the ACC, but there wasn't enough in the not like that's the situation that SMU could end up being. And even if they go 15-5 in the league, so I
Right.
really do think that you have to get at least two, if not all three of those games at home. And call me crazy, I think that they have the pieces to be able to do that. The
Oh
question
yeah.
is whether or not they're going to be able to get all three because like Louisville's really good, man. I really do think Louisville's really, really good.
It's the problem is going to be is just you take the league, right? Like even at NC State, you look at
Mhm.
their conference record and you're like, man, they're 2-4. Well, they just lost the last two games at the buzzer, losing the Carolina game at the buzzer and just losing last night to Virginia Tech. That's just how this league is. Will Georgia Tech ever get healthy? With Stanford at 500 in the league, they always got a chance with Max and Renault on the floor. They got a chance. They're well coached. Florida State is Florida State. They're gonna, they're gonna be right there. They're gonna figure it out. Can they score enough? If they can score, they can compete with you. They're gonna defend. But the rest of it is just it's literally just it's wide open. And for the sake of the league at times, like I really want to say I wish I could just say, all right, for the just the betterment of the league. Hey, Clemson, Louisville, Wake Forest, and Carolina and SMU. How about the rest of you guys? Let them win all the games you play them,
Mhm.
and then that way we can get 5 or 6 teams in the league. But it isn't that way. Everybody's going to compete. You got to earn it, and some of these other teams are going to play themselves into it. So, um, but SMU is going to be one of those teams. You're right. I don't know. They're going to have to maybe go 15-5, 14-6, whatever it is, and then they got to figure out. They got to be a team to get one of those quality wins in the tournament. They need to win a couple of games,
Mhm.
maybe make it to the ACC finals or do something like that. Maybe be the team that beats a Duke or beat a Louisville in an ACC tournament is a resume boosting win for them. But they got the pieces and the talent that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, the tough part once you get these leagues that are so bloated, right, and they get as big as the ACC is,
Right.
the Big Ten is. Um, Sometimes you're only going to get one shot at Duke.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
miss that one shot because it happened to come in December when you didn't have students at home and you had somebody out, that's your one chance. That was your
That's
chance to
it.
be able to land that marquee win, and you're not going to get it. So we mentioned earlier teams that you think have a chance to be able to pull an NC State, maybe win 4-4, maybe go 5-5, find a way to be able to get an ACC tournament upset win, maybe get that automatic bid there. I got a couple in mind that I think are sneaky. You mentioned Notre Dame earlier. Who else do you think has a chance to be able to pull off a an NC State?
I Notre Dame would be the team that I pick. I think they're a really good 8-9 team. They missed their best player for so long. We're talking about Carolina. They should have beat Carolina. I mean, Ellie Cadeau hits a 4-point play at the end of the game there, just completely flipped that. They've been in some dog fights. And I'm Michael Shrewsbury. I think he's as good a coach as there is in this league in the country. I'm a huge fan of his and love watching this team play. I'm going to go Notre Dame for one. And I don't know if considering Carolina that I would have to say SMU. I think SMU is a team that I think those are the two teams that I think could kind of make a run at the ACC tournament. They score enough. SMU does score enough, and then finding a way to grind out a game in Virginia last night shows me that they can figure it out. And when you got a guy like Boop Miller playing the way he's playing right now, you got a chance. But I think it's Notre Dame. They're the one team I just feel like healthy and all their parts together. They have enough balance and they're good enough to be that team that to pull an NC State and win 5 games, 4 or 5 games in March.
Yeah, it really is crazy with Marcus Burton back. They probably should have beat North Carolina. They probably should have beat NC State, and they gave Duke as much of a fight as anybody has given
Yep.
them
In Cameron.
in Cameron Indoor Stadium. So Notre Dame was one of the ones that I had listed down. The other one that I have, I think Florida State's a little bit sneaky
Yes.
because they have the length and the athleticism. They have some guys that can really go. But the one that I want to keep an eye on is Stanford. Maxime Reynaud, I don't know how often he's not going to be the best player on the floor when he's playing a game in the ACC. I think Jalen Blakes has kind of proven himself as an ACC caliber lead guard last couple games. And I know they're sitting here at 3-3 in the conference, but their 3 losses at Clemson, at Pitt, at Wake Forest, on the road against 3 of the teams that we think are top 6 in the conference, playing on the other side of the country in a different time zone. They got another one of those on Saturday. They have to play at North Carolina. So hopefully they're going to be a little bit more adjusted to the time difference. But I think that is a really big one for them to kind of set the tone. But at the same time, I think Stanford's got enough talent to be able to find a way to string 4 or 5 together. And Kyle Smith knows how to coach, man. He knows how to win.
He's a great coach. I wish that he could keep Max for another year and have a full offseason to recruit and get players in there. They're going to finish better than I think. They're going to exceed the expectations of where they were picked in the league. Going to Stanford and beating them is going to be tough. It's going to be tough out there. That travel and that schedule, I just don't. I talk to coaches about it all the time. Like I talked to Virginia and Virginia Tech. They were the ones doing it last week. And even talking to Virginia Tech staff, they flew private, but then had to stop in Denver on the way out there because the jet wouldn't make it all the way to Cal and Stanford. And so everybody's tossing ideas about that. That's a brutal stretch, man. It's just hard. So even for them and for Cal to come. So it'd be interesting to see once everybody goes through it, how they really feel about that. That's my only concern about Stanford is them and Cal. As much as we talk about the East Coast teams going west, they're doing it twice as much. They're coming east. They're doing it twice as much. So credit to those guys. I'd be curious to see how they really feel. I mean, you got to do it. You can't make an excuse about it. But I would really want to know how they really feel about that and the amount of times that they have
Stanford's doing it 4 times.
Yeah, yeah.
They at Clemson and Pitt
Yes.
first week of January, at
Yes.
Wake and North Carolina this week.
Yep.
They are at Georgia Tech and Duke, overlapping with Valentine's Day, and then they're ending the season at Notre Dame and Louisville. They got to do it 4 times, and that's not even counting playing at SMU. That's a lot of travel, man. And I'll tell you this: Goodman reported this the other day. They flew back from Pitt. I think they left at 12:45 a.m. out of the Pitt airport in a jet that held 37 people.
Yep.
They had to stop in Memphis to fuel up, and then I think they had to stop in Fort Collins to fuel up again. They had to make 2 stops. They didn't land until almost 6 a.m. Pacific time. That was a 9-hour trip getting back with guys that don't fit in one of those jets. I promise you that was one of those jets where it's like they got the 1 seat on one side and the 2 seats on the other side, and you walk down the middle, there's only 12 rows. There's no chance Maxime Reynaud was comfortable on that flight. He's probably sleeping on the floor.
Rob, that's what I mean about this travel. People are talking about these games. You got teams that are doing it. They're flying commercial. Like that's essentially the type of jet that Virginia Tech took. There was like a 30-something passenger seat, and they had to stop in Denver. And then they landed in Denver. It was like, oh, we got 2.5 hours or something like that before we get. And it's like, man. And then you get there, you spend a week, you play these 2 games. So that travel, it's going to be brutal. Some teams are going to go commercial. Like it's almost like you want to.
You're better off.
You're better off going commercial because you can walk around at least do that way. Maybe stretch your legs out a little bit that way. I don't know if it'd be interesting to see how teams decide what they do, right? Is it
Let
better to
me
go
let me ask you
commercial,
this. Let me
fly
ask you
private,
this.
whatever?
Let me ask you this. Do you think that when you get to the selection committee, right? And they are in that room and they are talking about who has to go or who's going to what games. You're talking about quad one wins or whatever. Like, do you think that if let's just say Stanford is in the pick on the bubble, right? Is that something where the committee should consider, okay, they got 4 losses in league play, but they're all on the road, all on the other side of the country, and this is what their travel's got to be like? Like, I think it's the same thing. The Mountain West deals with it a little bit too when you got to go like road trips to Wyoming because it's impossible to get to Laramie and you go there and it's negative whatever degrees. There's 9 people in the building and you got to go from being outside in the middle of the frozen tundra to trying to go play at 7,500 feet altitude. Like, I do feel like some of that stuff needs to get factored in when you're talking about what some of these teams have to deal with when they are traveling. You got to at least consider
It, to ask me what goes on in that room, I have
it.
no idea. I don't think anybody does. Like we're talking about
Fair.
the committee, let alone who's the NCAA, any of this right now. Like I don't think anybody knows what the hell's going on. Um, they won't care and it won't matter, right? I think it's everything now is going to be about money. And some teams you're just forced to sacrifice. Hey, we can't get a bigger plane because coaches might even say, hey, it's better we go commercial because I need NIL money. Players would rather say, man, if it's rather me getting my money or flying on this jet, give me my money. Let
Hmm.
us fly. Let us fly commercial. So it is what it is. No, to answer your question, no, I don't think it's going to matter. I don't think that committee is concerned about it. I just think they're too busy crunching numbers because we still don't even. I don't think everyone even agrees on the qualifications of what it is to even actually get in the tournament. So that won't be something I think they consider, even though I think sometimes you should, because what they're doing, traveling east 4 times a year, man, playing is I would be curious to see how they really feel about that once they've gone through the whole season.
It's brutal, man. I don't. Let's just say that I'm glad that I'm not the one that's going to have to make that all that travel. So,
And
uh,
Rob, I didn't even know that you would do it. I was shocked just to hear, even when the teams are talking about this, like they're getting on jets and they can't make it. So we got to stop to refuel to keep going. At that point, I'm like, man, you better off going. Seriously, you're better off going commercial.
mhm. Get there direct. Get everybody pre-check. Get all the way through. Get on a jet. Buy out the first class,
Buy
whatever
out
it
first
is.
class. Yeah, buy
Yeah,
out
buy
first
out first
class.
class. Put your tallest
Exit
guys in
row.
first
Get
class.
exit row.
If you went 0 for 6 in the last game, you can go sit in the back. You get row
Give
17,
him a middle
right?
seat. You give him a middle seat. You don't get me 10 rebounds. Put your ass in CC.
What's the joke? It's not pay for play, it's pay for play well, right? That's the joke
Hey,
that
that's
people are making
exactly what
now.
it is.
Now it's whatever. If you play well, you don't have to get stuck in the middle seat.
There you
That's
go.
what you got to do. You don't have to get stuck in the
Hey,
middle seat with a couple civilians. You can go sit in first class. You play well. You get me 20 off the bench.
hey,
Boom, first class, row 1A. There you go.
hey.
Uh,
Minimum exit row.
yeah, there you go. Listen, RC, this was fun, man. Love picking your brain on the ACC. You know that conference as well as anybody. And I am glad that you have confirmed my suspicions from the preseason that Louisville was the second best team in the league. They don't even need Case and Pryor. Just imagine how good they've been with him. They might have been battling Duke. They might have been in the Final Four already, Randolph.
Hey
I'm
man,
taking
you
my
can
I'm
spot
taking my
on.
victory laps. I'm
You
taking
can
my
spot it. You should. You should. I'm a bow down to you. You called that back in September.
I
I'm a
don't get a
bow
lot
down to
right.
you.
Hey, I
You
don't get a
do it.
lot right. If I get something right, I'm celebrating, man. I'm celebrating.